Right. Good morning, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to have all three of you with us. This is the second session of the military and strategy session of the Valley of Words International Literature Festival. It's a great honor to have with us this morning Lieutenant General Panag, Lieutenant General Bakshi, and Maninder Kohli, who is the president of the Indian Mountaineering Federation of India. Quick, very brief introduction, though I'm sure for most of the viewers, introductions are probably not required. General Panag, he commanded a combat group and pioneered in its induction into the high altitude area of Ladakh, mainly eastern Ladakh. So, and he's been very active writing and talking about what is happening with China presently. So, he is perhaps the most qualified to do so. He also commanded an armored brigade, also a mountain brigade in high altitude, an armored division, and a strike corps. He was also the Northern Army commander and retired as the Central Army commander, having held two commands during his illustrious career in the army. He continues to write a lot. He's one of our leading intellectuals in the country, reads a lot, and is very, very vocal about his views on various issues. And welcome, sir. Good morning. It's a pleasure to have you with us this morning on this lovely morning. General Praveen Bakshi, well, what can I say? A very dear friend. He spent 40 years in the army. He retired as the Eastern Army commander, where he was looking after the LAC with China and 3 other countries. And he is from the Skinner's Horse. He went on to command that regiment and also an armored brigade, a rapid division in the desert, and a corps in the Punjab and Jammu and Kashmir area. As army commander, he was also responsible for the Doklam incident with China. And it's always a pleasure to have you with us, Praveen. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Mr. Maninder is the son of a very, very famous gentleman. His father was Captain Kohli, who led the 1965 Everest expedition, the first Indian expedition, which put first Indian was, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Maninder, it was HPS Ahluwalia who unfurled the tricolor on Everest under your father's leadership. And it also had on that expedition Mr. Gurdial Singh, who taught me geography in Doon School. Maninder is now the president of the Indian Mountaineering Federation, as I mentioned earlier, and he has a banking background. He's from Citi. He was in Citibank for many years, and he has also been very active in leading a lot of expeditions into various parts of the Himalayas. His role as the president of the IMF is of particular interest because if you all recall, in the 70s, before the Siachen flare-up really took place, Pakistan actually used this as a weapon. They used to send all those expeditions into the while we were still there was ambiguity about who was really in charge, who had control of the area north of NJ 9842. Pakistan used it as a major tactic because they sent Austrian, Japanese, German, British expeditions into that area to sort of try and claim that area. So we will get his perspective from a civilian point of view after we have got, we've got the views of General Panag and Praveen. We are talking mainly of the northern boundary and uh, its border management. Northern boundary means China, and uh, before 1949, India did not have China as adversary on the border. We had Tibet and we had Xinjiang, but all that changed after the PRC took over and throughout the Kuomintang government, which then moved away into the Taiwan region. And before we knew what was going on, Jammu and Kashmir had Xinjiang as a border, which of course was taken over fully by the Chinese after 1949. And then in 1950 onwards, Tibet was annexed by them under various, for they kept calling it various things, autonomous region, this, that, and the other. But eventually, India, from the Indian perspective, we had a new adversary on the northern border. Let's start with General Panag, sir. I'm going to give you 11 minutes. You've been the Northern Army commander. You know the area inside out. Uh, the historical perspective, we will discuss a little later. But over to you, sir. How do you see the situation in Ladakh, in particular, which was under your command, and how do you think India should really progress this whole thing, sir?
See, boundaries like power flow from the barrel of a gun. And they are used by nation states to impose their hegemony over the others. It is rarely a question of economic wealth or of a particular importance of the territory. I think the underlying reason is always the competitive conflict amongst nations. What China wants is that it wants India to be a junior cooperative partner. And this is its intent. It was true in 1962 to a point, but in 62 there were other reasons. I'm talking of the present. And so it has kept the border situation alive. The difference between what Chinese want, that is their 59 claim line, and what was the LAC as in April this year was not much difference. There were only 2 or 3 places, that is primarily starting from the north, the Depsang Plains, where in the lower half of the Depsang Plains, that is towards Burtse, we were going up to about 16 to 18 kilometers from where we are today, and Chinese were also patrolling up to their perception, that is the area of the bottleneck. But this was the difference. It's about 16 to 18 kilometers, and only the lower half of the Depsang Plains. Galwan, there was really no difference. It was, in my view, it was just a marginal difference from one bend to the other, a few meters here and there. There was not much difference. Gogra and Hot Springs, it was not about Gogra and Hot Springs per se, because Konkala is one place which is recognized by the Chinese from the word go. It has been the international boundary, and it is so today. It was more to do with the Kugrang River. The Kugrang River goes north from Hot Springs, and from there the routes lead to the upper reaches of Galwan. Uh, in fact, in 1962, our post was at the almost near the source of the Galwan River, 80 kilometers upstream from the junction of Galwan with the shore, and this was the route used. So we had been developing our roads in this area. So their actions in Gogra and Hot Springs and in Kugrang River and Chunglung Nala were related to this part. As far as north of Pangong is concerned, uh, even the Chinese own 1959 claim line, which was actually never given out, but during the discussions which were held in 1960 between the officials of both sides, and these have been reproduced by Claude RP, our famous China scholar. They are all available on the net. So when you take the coordinates, the longitude and latitude that the Chinese gave out during the discussions, the LAC, it says that it enters the Pangong at finger 8. That means what we were holding was actually correct. But somehow, if that happens, then the Chinese feel that we may progress along the north bank, and to cut off this route which are going via Khurnak Fort to the north. So it was this reason, and also that we could use that route to get behind the Spangur Gap defenses of the Chinese. The Chinese area from the lakeside. So this is the reason why they came there. So, then the perceptual difference in Damchok is immense. In Damchok, the 59 claim line almost comes up to Phukche and goes on the eastern side of the valley. It's a big chunk of territory. But though in 62 they came up to this point, because Damchok village is there and it is habited, so that is why they have never really pressed on in this area. And this is the place where they feel threatened from, because this Nagari town is just about 50 kilometers away. In Chumar, there are marginal differences. What I'm trying to say is that the territory was never an issue. It is primarily China wants to impose its hegemony over us, one. Secondly, the infrastructure that we were developing from in the south region of the Depsang Plains, from Butse, bottleneck, we were developing roads to go right up to the LAC. Now, this is something which they are very wary of. Even in Galwan, we were making the road up to the LAC, and more than that, from Hot Springs, we were going north up the Kugrang Nala. We have gone almost 35 to 40 kilometers into the Kugrang River with our road, and then we were also going into the Chunglung route, Nala. So what they felt is that in case we develop this side and pose a threat to Galwan, then we can cut off the entire Galwan Valley or whatever Chinese area that they have claimed earlier. So, and then of course, in the Pangong area again, they were patrolling up to Finger 4 at some point, and then we developed our road up to Finger 4, and we did not allow them to, thereafter patrols were blocking each other. So, and of course, as I said, this is what they have claimed, but it is not part of their 59 points that they had given out. So what China has done today is that it has sort of reacted to our assertion as a emerging power, our relations with USA, our opposition to the One Belt, One Corridor, and promoting the Quad, and our meddling in Pacific. This is not to their liking. So this is the macro reason. The immediate reason otherwise was our development of the border roads. The cardinal mistake that we made in these areas, south area of the Depsang Plains, Butse area, bottleneck, and east of it, and even in Kograng River, and to a point in north of Pengongso, is that if we want to develop roads in sensitive areas, then we must make sure that the troops are deployed there. All of us are aware that our defenses are at the knuckle in Ladakh. Knuckle. When I say knuckle, if you spread your fingers, then these are the points of the LAC, which are relatively not that defensible in terms of terrain, because they tend to merge into the plateau, except at a few places. And our defenses were at the knuckle. That means where all the roots, this thing. So, and we were holding them in sufficient strength, and our perception was that the Chinese will always come in strength and to attack us, and we will tackle them at these places, and that we are sufficiently strong here. Of course, we had plans on how to look after the forward zone that we had, of almost varying from 10 to 80 kilometers. The distance from Lukung to Konkala is 100 kilometers. 100 kilometers. And from Dungti to Damchok is 70 kilometers. So we were aware of this. And in fact, way back in 1988, one of my own tasks as a combat group commander was to capture Shirijap as a preemptive task. And since we didn't have a road going towards Sirijap, like we have today up to Finger 4, we were to use our BMPs to swim across the lake and capture Sirijap. So these plans were there always, and I'm sure the plans were there today. And there are enough troops if we could have preempted them. In my view, we first had an intelligence failure at the top, where we could not decide what the Chinese strategic intent was, what are they planning to do. Then we had, we thought that when whatever we saw, we interpreted it as that they are just coming for the usual business of Depsang Plains or something like what happened at Doklam. It is not serious, they'll go away. We wish the problem away. So we didn't respond, which is a military failure as well, both intelligence failure and, in my view, a military failure. Maybe since the political control in this with China is immense, so it could be a political failure as well. So what do we do now? Well, in my view, the differential in power, at least on paper, between India and China is so much in terms of high technology, in terms of drones, in terms of jamming capabilities, in terms of PGMs, loiter ammunition, you name it, and geospatial the capabilities, that, in my view, our idea of warfare in mountains is a romanticized version of the 1962 war. Later on, we saw part of it in 65 in J&K and in 99. It is that we are sitting on dominating heights and the person is coming and bashing against you. And surely in today's Indian army, if Chinese do that, their defeat is ordained. But the Chinese are not going to do such thing. And we know it and they know it. It will be a high technology attack for which, in my view, we are not ready. So at this juncture, the best we can salvage is hold on to what we have, make proper defenses, and in case the Chinese now enjoy a phenomenal advantage. They can cut us off at Butse in Depsang Plains. That means Depsang, entire DBO gets isolated. No way can we relieve it. It is at the tactical level, yes, you will fight, but at the operational and strategic level, Depsang Plains are indefensible. Similarly, the forward zone, by coming up right up to Finger 4, Phobrang, which is the bottleneck, the entire area to Konkala, to Hot Springs and all goes from here. They can cut you off here. That means they got a large chunk of territory, almost 100 kilometers deep from Lukung to Konkala. And elsewhere, of course, as I said, nothing much has happened. So the best bet for us is to hold on to what we have, and to fight from there. And should the Chinese escalate the situation, then we should use our resources for an all-out offensive in the Indus Valley, from the Kailash range towards Rudok, from Spangurso and all these areas, and in the Chumar. This is the only area where we have got some operational and strategic freedom. At the political level, in my view, I think while everybody says that both sides don't want war, I think that while China doesn't want war, because it has shown to the world that where we are and where China is, and it has intruded, it has dared you, and we have not responded at all. Whatever the skirmish, which I thought was a military disgrace that took place in Galwan, it has never happened in the history of our army that unarmed soldiers were sent to a situation like this, and while bravery and sacrifice are being used as a kind of what should I say, an excuse for such a failure. So I would say that politically we are not ready for war, and we are quite prepared to Chinese to go back with extended buffer zones, which will extend from Bottleneck, 18 kilometers to the east, and between finger 4 and finger 8. And nothing like that will happen in Hot Springs and Gogra, because there, once moment we are on our side of the LAC, we don't pose any threat to the Chinese. So these are the two places, and want us down from the Kailash range, because Kailash range threatens them. And even Kunal has written in his book that, I'll just make the last point, that after they had got to the 59 claim line in the first phase of Ladakh, they still went and came to attack Kailash range, because Kailash range threatens them the most. And it is the trump card that we have, that if you have got Kailash range with you, and no matter what he does in Depsang Plains, no matter what he does north of Pengong, so you have got him by the jugular here. Even if we have not gone and captured Blacktop, which we should have. So with this, I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Kunal, for giving me a little extra time. Thank you so much.
Praveen, you were the Eastern Army commander when the whole incident of Doklam happened. General Panag has just given us the entire perspective of what's happening in Ladakh. But you were the man on the spot. You were the guy who actually handled Doklam, and I don't think too many of us have heard exactly what happened. But anyway, there were obviously two things which have happened. One is a major intelligence failure, which even I've written about. Especially the fact that the MHA had a lot of this information which did not permeate down to the army as far as Ladakh was concerned. We've had a similar situation in the east as well. Even historically, we've been blundering away, whether you look at Fishtail 1, Fishtail 2, etc. Anyway, let's start with you, Praveen. Very, very interested to hear what you have to say about Doklam in particular.
All right. Thank you, Kunal. After that brilliant exposition by General Panag, let me try and give you a different perspective on two issues. One, I'll briefly touch on Doklam, but that's now passé, 3.5 years down the line. And I would also like to talk about the overall architecture and our approach to border management, which is resulting into these problems time and again. It has an effect. It has an overarching effect on on our national security. Firstly, about Doklam and what's happening in Eastern Ladakh. All I'll say is they are as different as chalk and cheese. Doklam was a misadventure in my personal, opinion and assessment by a local military commander, wherein only a platoon of border guards with 17 odd plant equipment came to make a road from Doklam towards Jampheri. And here I'd like to bust a couple of myths which people have been writing about, and I'm quite astounded because a lot of things are in public domain already. The objective was never Doklam. It was Jamferi Ridge. Doklam was
Yeah.
just a passage where they wanted to make a road. To say we had a tactical victory at Doklam and now we've lost it and they've built infrastructure is all falling into the trap laid by the Chinese. It's all optics. It has no
Yes.
substance, no military value at all. So, by creating a few huts, making an odd helipad where you're looking down on it, notwithstanding the fact with all technology, I can say with assurance, in the first few hours of a skirmish, it will be obliterated and they'll be running back down towards Yatung. So let me bust this myth of Doklam, and a lot of learned people have been writing about it without fully knowing the import of it. Having said that, why it's different as chalk and cheese is because here in Eastern Ladakh, they've come with a purpose. They've come with objectives in mind. They've come with a larger intent. It is with the sanction of Beijing from day one. It is only incidental that the military commander remains the same, Zhao Zhongqi, the Western Theater commander.
Yes.
He was to retire now. I wonder if he's retired or just about to retire or may have got an extension. And so he's still there and he had an axe to grind because there was loss of face for him at Doklam. And I had met him personally in Calcutta, so I know exactly what he was thinking about. So that is about Doklam, and nothing more to it should be read in it. I can take that on further in question answer time. Now, coming on to the larger issue of how does India look at its border management? Now, that's something which actually, disturbs me a bit, where we are not getting fully, we're not fully alive as a nation how we handle our borders. International borders are guided by four doctrines: doctrines of absolute sovereignty, doctrine of absolute integrity of territory,
Yeah.
doctrine of limited territorial sovereign integrity, and doctrine of commonality of international resources and correlative rights. Now, in a rule based order, these doctrines work fine. But when you have a rogue nation which does not abide by does not want to abide by the rules of a world order, then you're bound to have these problems. It was obviously evidenced historically over a period of time, but more recently in the South China Sea, East China Sea, and it is now spilled over to our borders, which has always been there. He's been moving around. So there is no gainsaying the fact that our border with China is volatile, contested, and herein is the paradox that despite the Kargil Review Committee report very clearly articulating a one border, one force theory, had a line in it which said contested borders will be with the Indian Army. But when we come to China, the lead agency is the ITBP. And surprisingly, unlike the BSF, which comes and works along with the, if I don't want to use the word under command, but that's what it is actually, with the Indian Army on the Pakistan border, or let's say even Bangladesh border, the ITBP to date has no mandate to come under command the Indian Army in case of a war, hot war, skirmish. They are an independent force. And it is equally evidenced, it was as evident in Doklam, where they were nowhere in sight. They are the ones. And if you look at Eastern Ladakh, thankfully not much has come out in the public domain, but the telling picture was, I don't know why it was put out, ITBP was celebrating International Yoga Day whilst the Chinese were intruding into our territory. I mean, it's laughable. We're not serious about these things. Now, moving on to the ministries, let me tackle it at the apex level. We've got three ministries looking after our borders: Ministry of External Affairs, Ministry of Home Affairs, and Ministry of Defense. Now, the Ministry of Home Affairs has a full department of border management headed by a secretary. If you see the annual report of the MHA, of 1920, 1890, it will be instructive. It is a revelation how MHA handles our border. Whilst they write paragraphs and paragraphs on our borders with Bangladesh, with Pakistan, on China, there is one paragraph only. As if they want to wish it away, as General Panag said. The problem is not there. Just one paragraph. They are not even serious about it. Now,
that's
MA,
incredible, isn't it? I mean, sorry.
I'm just letting out, stating facts and leaving for the audience to decide really what you garner from it. It shows you your seriousness. You see it, you can Google it, it's there. Secondly, MEA now steps in for border resolution. Whenever, all the border talks are led by the MEA. And where is MHA today in Eastern Ladakh? They said it's not our responsibility. They've kept quiet. Why is ITBP not your responsibility? So they're quiet. Now the Indian Army, and I want to make a very candid statement, is not, I repeat, not trained for border management. Indian Army is only trained for border guarding. And there is a huge difference between these two aspects. We are not into policing. We are not into demographic control. We are not into trade promotion. We are not into narcotics. And it's not part of our training curriculum. But yes, when it comes to border guarding, we are at the forefront. And that's exactly what we are doing in, actually, today, almost the entire LAC. The Indian Army is doing border guarding. Even the IB sector of Sikkim is now almost akin to an LAC, I dare say, in terms of a scenario of conflict, likely conflicts to take place. So I'll leave it at that out here. And now the third thing about border management is we've got too many forces doing border management. We've got ITBP, we've got BSF, we've got SSB. Now, SSB was an adjunct of the RNAW of yesteryear. Now, when its own task under RNAW became irrelevant, rather than merge it with another existing border guarding force, this turf building carried on and they made a new SSB and gave them two small borders of Nepal and of Bhutan. How ridiculous. And one more DGP post and IGB post and what have you. And then we have the acme of paradoxes in Assam Rifles. Here, I fail to understand. Assam Rifles is chartered as part of the Kargil Review Committee, for those who may not know, for the border with Myanmar. But it's the oldest paramilitary force, officered by the Indian Army, but controlled by the MHA for logistics and equipping and things of that nature. So here is a force of 46 battalions, which has two heads. They report to MHA also and MOD also. A paradoxical situation. I, for one, would be a great votary to say, if MHA wants control, please remove the 15 battalions they raised purely for border guarding the Myanmar border, and they are highly inadequate to guard that border, and leave the rest of the Assam Rifles under the MOD, take them out of MHA completely, as it is, it's officered by the Indian Army, and let them go ahead. So now this is another paradox which needs to be addressed. And lastly, I'm going to say, Kunal, is, in the absence of a national security strategy, border management is part of that national security strategy. Now, when you don't have a strategy, you don't have a clear border management policy. It's very instructive to see on the same MHA report, and I think it was 17-18. They commissioned PwC to tell the MHA. It's all on the annual report of theirs, to tell the MHA what's wrong with how they're going about border management. Please see the recommendations of PwC. They've done an exceedingly fantastic job of it. But how much of it has been implemented? Now, because of these 3-4 inadequacies, I feel we should be having a Ministry of Homeland Security which looks after our border management, because we have problems in J&K, we have problems with China, we have problems with Bangladesh smuggling, we've got problems with Myanmar, we've got problems everywhere. And I have not even touched the coastal areas, The coastal areas is a different kettle of fish completely. I'll stop here, Kunal, and take on questions as we move along. Thank you.
Thank you, Praveen. Not only is that very candid, it's bloody frightening, if I may say so. So, would you like to add to anything that Praveen has said in particular, especially the
No, no,
ITBP and the intelligence?
with Praveen, because this ITBP is a major problem. And now the LAC is manned by the ITBP there, and then on top of that, they don't are not answerable to us. They don't give us the first-hand information. I mean, we come to the ridiculous situation like we locate some of our troops there along with them, some a JSO or some OR just to remain in picture. I mean, that is the kind of situation that prevails in Ladakh, and I think this is something that needs to be sorted out. Let them do the border management, but for purposes where even anything about military action is involved, I mean, they should be placed under the Indian Army. Otherwise, because even in Ladakh side, we are allowing a limited amount of trade to take place. So to that extent, the police forces are required, but we have to find a better methodology of a better coordination and better proper command and control as far as the ITBP is concerned.
That brings me to you, Maninder. We were talking about this yesterday. You're heading the IMF, for example. Now, as I had in my opening remarks said that even in the case of Siachen, we saw how Pakistan used tourism and letting the general by just giving permission into an area, you're kind of ad hoc claiming that it belongs to you. As someone who's been very, very involved with this entire physical belt of the extending from Ladakh right up till Kumaon, Garhwal, everything that you're very familiar with. What is your view? How do you see it from a civilian perspective? What Praveen is talking about is a complete lack of a cohesive kind of a strategy. You were mentioning some of these problems which you also which you thought needed to be highlighted. So over to you.
Yes, I just wanted to share that I'm very closely connected with the Indian Mountaineering Foundation, but I'm not the president. But I handle several functions there. But I wanted to just share a perspective, very different perspective on typically on climbing, adventure, trekking in the Himalayan belt, and I've been observing, for example, like you started with the discussion on and in Pakistan in the Siachen side, that how the teams from abroad and from within Pakistan were freely climbing in Siachen area, while the strategy from our side has always been to restrict movement. So it's a very, very different kind of approach, and only recently has there been some, I would say, a change of strategy from our side, where teams are now kind of civilians are allowed, but the process is still very cumbersome to get anybody to go there. So if you look at the things which are connected from an adventure mountaineering viewpoint, it's satellite phones, it's maps, it is inner line permits, access to these mountain areas, and that affects tourism. It affects our own employment of people who are living in these mountain areas. It affects Indians themselves who want to venture to some of these areas which they have been reading about, they have interest in. So I guess it's a cumbersome system. It's something which people don't want to enter into, and then they look for other avenues. Everybody is short of time. I'm talking about civilian life these days. Everybody has a short window, and in that period, they want to just quickly do whatever they can manage, and they don't want to be caught up in any bureaucratic aspect. The country which has a border with China, but has a different situation, I guess, is Nepal, where there is completely no inner line permits. You just go freely to wherever you want, and it's quite open and kind of transparent. And as a result of that, uh, I would say the tourism and adventure which Nepal attracts is far more higher than India. And in fact, most Indians also now go to Nepal. It's preferred as compared to India, where actually 70% of the Himalaya are housed in are in the Indian Himalaya. So the opportunities exist for us, but we have always it's get because of, I guess, national security and various complications, like what mentioned. uh, Things have not developed for us to its full potential, and that's something which is slightly disheartening. And I hope, in due course, these things do change. Obviously, the conflict which happened recently is something very serious. It's far more serious than pursuing adventure. But I'm talking more, from a point of view of the last several years, when we have observed the growth of the sport.
But I think it's a very important factor that people should be allowed into this area. Now, one of the problems we had in '62 and the period before that, and nobody really knew anything about these areas. Today, if you look at Ladakh, with the amount of people who are going into Ladakh, I'm in Kulu right now, and I can see now with the tunnel having opened up, a lot of tourists going in, and people are exploring the area. There's a lot of adventure activity taking place, which also brings into focus these remote areas, especially Ladakh, Nifa, Arunachal, parts of Sikkim, and I think this makes a lot of difference because one of the biggest problems earlier was this veil of secrecy. General Panag, this veil of secrecy is there again in from what you have been commenting. What is your view as far as projecting this? Do you think this should be one of the points which was when this whole problem with China began was that let the army do its own job. Let's not overly comment on it. But do you think that, especially in today's environment where the situation is very different, just like to get a comment from you on this. Do you really think we should be uh, literally opening up these areas and let there be a lot more transparency?
No, as far as I think what the point Maninder has made, I'm totally with him. Indians are adventurous people. I mean, you give once the road is through at Depsang Plains, we should allow people to go to Depsang Plains, allow hotels to come up there. I mean, if people are willing to run generators, take their own fuel, and have it centrally heated, why are we restricting them? And same thing on the Pangong. We if the Chinese in fact did some gimmick like that, we should put houseboats onto the Pangong. What's the problem? After all, people go
We
to
should.
visit Jungfrau in Switzerland, which is also frozen all the time and it's open throughout the year. So same way, I think we should open up whole of Eastern Ladakh. The more people that are there, the more our layer over the territory will become solid.
It's really a question of planting your flag and literally claiming it. And if you leave it to the good old Indian spirit, you will soon have ice cream stands and balloon centers on Pangong. So
Absolutely.
that's why they don't
In fact,
really.
just,
Money
just that one village, just that one village that is there in Damchok, a small village.
has
That is a
has
great
created a complete.
evidence of China. That's a
This
great. It puts a lot of check on China to try anything in the Indus River Valley.
that Dumti and that Demstock area. Yeah. But
Yeah,
Maninder, you think
I'm
that
talking.
you think that this can be developed in a very systematic and serious manner as well? I mean, you think there are enough people who would be willing to really put money into infrastructure and stuff like that in these areas? Because I think, as General Panag is also pointing out, that this will be a very important thing to do.
Yeah, I think so. I think, right now, as you just mentioned, how people are moving through the Rohtang tunnel. Indians are definitely keen, to get to border areas, get to remote areas, explore. The number of people who are doing adventure sports, doing climbing, trekking is multiplied manifold. It's nice to see that happening. It's generating employment also at the in the mountain states, which is really important. I see so many people who now are doing really well, financially. They're staying also in the mountain states. They're not running for jobs to to our cities and living in crowded conditions. And so I feel that that if we create the right environment, it will really be beneficial for everybody concerned, from a adventure viewpoint as well as a employment generation viewpoint, and maybe strategically, as said, about just having a like a flag there that this is our place and we want to enjoy it, and we want people to come there. So I think there will be a lot of interest of people to move into the remote areas, as long as the bureaucratic hurdles around them are all kind of managed.
So in Nifa in particular, Arunachal in particular, land of the five rivers actually. If Punjab was called Punjab, I think they may have named Nifa Punjab at that time, because you've got some of the finest rivers, Kameng, Subansiri, the Dibang, the Siang. What's your perspective as far as because again, you've got to balance that whole thing about the tribes, which have not been so exposed to the people from the plains, etc. A slightly different perspective, but from a military point of view, I think, what's your opinion on that?
Kunal, I think it would not be an overstatement if I said that most people of India are blissfully ignorant about the geography of Northeast in general and Arunachal Pradesh in particular, and especially the areas bordering the LAC. Uh, for some strange reason, we are wiser when we look back at history. We have deliberately kept the Northeast and Arunachal Pradesh in particular underdeveloped. There was a fear that the Chinese would perhaps use the roads and communications we build up as axes to come into the state oblique into India. And this opinion, let me tell you, prevailed and lingered on even when I was in service, even when I was in Eastern Army. There was some vestiges of this sort of thought process still lingering around. I, for one, was completely opposed to it, as were many others like me. And we wanted development, because what's the point of having forces available to you when you can't take them to the place where you want to apply them? And that's exactly the paradigm in the Northeast today. I'm giving you a military viewpoint. So I would not, I would actually, I was willing to bargain for my living accommodation in the whole of command area, vis-a-vis getting me more and more roads. But there is a huge problem here, which is twofold. One, uh, those areas are very tough, and we our capability of development and infrastructure development and making roads is not as it is with the Chinese. That's one. Secondly, whilst a lot of people do BRO bashing, I for one would like to take an alternate view, and that is, if you impoverish a task force for want of funds, if you apply different metrics of monies given to, let's say, NHAI for building 1 kilometer of road or carpeting 50 kilometers of road, and you give one third of that metric to the BRO and then say they don't deliver, I think that's highly, highly unfair to that organization. So they were the BRO, if you see historically, has kept at about 33% of their budgeting. What they demand, they get only about 33%. It may have changed now, but that is what it was earlier. In fact, I would say that at some places, what the British left us with, the communications, we have not even been able to maintain that. What we talk of new alignments. Of course, now it's dawning, and there is a huge number of, you're all heard of the 73 strategic roads and all. More importantly, we have Cross Arunachal Pradesh road coming. We are trying to link all the capitals of all the states of Northeast today. So there is we just inaugurated a new bridge, which has hugely not only impacted the economy of that region, but also helped us militarily. So our easternmost deployments don't have to come back and then go over the bridge. And if you see historically, and Kunal, you will know better than anyone else, the British, they developed the communications towards the south or east of Brahmaputra. Rather, I'll say south. Why? Because the tea gardens and all were all there. So we require the roads north of Brahmaputra. Because we need to move our troops up to the LAC when we require from our cantonments. And here I'd like to touch on one more issue. Uh, we mooted the idea. Frankly, I will give this idea to a major. It was not my idea. I took fancy to it and I pushed it as much as I could push it. Of course, there'll be many others who will stake claim that it was their idea. Is tunneling of the Brahmaputra. I spoke to the DMRC head at Calcutta when he was tunneling the Hooghly. And I said, okay, can you do the same for Brahmaputra? The dynamics are different. Brahmaputra, you know how vast it is. He says the technology is the same. It's not very deep.
Yeah.
And we can do it. And first, it got banished at MOD and all, and etc., etc. And finally, they said we'll give it to the BRO, which was stoutly resisted. You require technology, you require those huge German boring machines. But I'm saying if tunneling takes place, it'll be a game changer, especially for the Northeast. Unlike JNK, where the communication is fairly well developed and requires more, of course, especially in the border areas and eastern Ladakh. Northeast is crying for it, and we require it, and it will boost tourism, it will boost the local economy, and it will help us militarily. Thank you.
Well, one of the things which I thought was a idea. I mean, it's always little ideas which eventually germinate into bigger things. Is why not look at creating a hovercraft force for the armed forces? Look at Arunachal. I mean, you could move a huge number of troops and stuff like that. If you give these rivers to New Zealand, when you see what happens, they'll have just about every tourist in the world coming to do things over there. We just not thinking, broadly enough. And I think that there, Maninder, you had also mentioned Bhutan. The fact that they had a different policy about only allowing for foreigners into that area and not Indians and Bhutanese to go up to the border. Just a quick comment on that, please, from you.
No, Bhutan is a interesting option for adventure enthusiasts, but the policy which is right now going on for many years is that Indians are not allowed to move close to the border areas for mountaineering or trekking. I think this is but foreigners from any other country, they are allowed. So the Indians are then relegated to the foothills. So you typically roam around in Paro, Thimpu area, and you can't head north. And this has been going on for a few years, quite frustrating from an adventurer point of view, because you like to go, and because the real mountaineering trekking is there, in the foothills, there is a limited opportunity. Yeah. So that's a bit sad, but that's the way things have panned out. I think it's an agreement between India and China that none of its nationals will come to the borders, but other people can. So this is something which is going on for a few years.
I've got 2 minutes or so left. Praveen, one quick question to you. The Chinese claim on eastern Bhutan. This is a new development. What do you think is what's going on in their head?
I think the Chinese adopted a disruptive way of leadership long before we even acknowledged it. You focus on one area, they'll take you to another area. It's like a blister on the landscape. They keep diluting your focus. But in the case of Bhutan, to my mind, it is more to pressurize them into getting a border agreement signed, divorced from India. Whereas you know very well that Bhutan and India are the only two countries with which China hasn't settled its border. With India, it's deliberate, but it's very, very to de-hyphen Bhutan from India and get it going. And they are willing to make a lot of give up a lot of claims in the north, and by adding east to the plate now, also give up that claim later on, claim it and then give it up, because they are interested in the western Bhutan and southwest Bhutan, Kumbi Valley area. They say it's non-negotiable, and they want this area of Torsa Nala and Jamfari Ridge. They want it back. So they are willing to give up in the north, and so I think the eastern part is all part of this, psychological thing of putting pressure on Bhutan and to make it dehyphenated from India.
Well, great. I think lots of issues have come up. We will have the last 15 minutes. We'll throw it open to Q&A as the audience also gets involved. Thank you for the most illuminating talk, all three of you, and we will now take it on into the next phase, which is where the audiences will be asking questions. Thank you, gentlemen, and we will now open the floor to questions from the audience. Thank you.